Good afternoon, Australia. Good evening, America. And good morning, Jerusalem, Moscow, and anyone else listening from Europe. Welcome back to Radio Toni. This is the Everyday Business Show, and I'm your host, Toni Lontis. We have an amazing guest for you today. But before I introduce you, just to let you know, those listening live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, you will have the delightful Peo in the Philippines watching out for your comments and questions and ready to send you any links that you need from the information on the show today. If you don't get those links, or if you're listening whilst driving in the car, pop over to radiotoni.com and you will find all the information on our wonderful guest today, Amir Meshel. Now, don't forget, if you missed the live of this show, you can always catch up across Binge TV in the US, and the Toni TV channel app is now available on all LG, Samsung, and Roku smart TVs across the world. Now, to tell you about our amazing guest this afternoon, Mr. Amir Meshel. He is a second-generation investor, and he witnessed key renovation secrets at the tender age of 10. By the age of 16, Amir immersed himself in developing his investor mindset, starting with just $5,000 and the benefit of training in financial planning at a Big Four Australian bank. Amir invested in regional New South Wales, Tasmania, and Western Australia. After consecutive years and a six-figure incomes and extending into a seven-figure profit from real estate, Amir became a real estate agent. Now Amir works purely as a buyer's agent, negotiating on behalf of the buyer. He's the author of a wonderful series called Where's the Bees Blueprint, including how to appeal to a vendor that isn't ready, renovate for sale, master short-term accommodation without becoming a part-time cleaner, write an options contract, grow on LinkedIn, market using Clubhouse on Android and Apple ISO, monetize on Facebook, attract on Instagram, and securely grow your income in property without becoming a landlord. It's a fantastic series from Amir. And he specialises in the region within a 3-hour drive of Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane CBDs. So here's just what some people are saying about Amir. Because we chose a property in Australia, because our Chinese parents told us that it was a great investment and it would secure our retirement wealth, we chose Amir Meshel as our buyer's agent because we didn't want to risk trying to purchase a large investment. There's a lot of money involved, and we felt if we didn't have the level of expertise required to purchase confidently, we found Amir through a referral from someone we knew. I didn't want to Google someone I didn't know. Amir helped with the uncertainty and also spent a lot of time with us and made us feel really comfortable. We were time poor and didn't know where to look for a property. We appreciated Amir's expert opinion at the time. Amir cut through the noise and got straight to the point. We didn't want to listen to the media as we felt it was giving us the wrong advice. In the end, Amir was very patient with us. And as a result, we're very pleased with our purchase. Thank you, Amir, from Kelly and James in China. Welcome to the show, Amir. I am so grateful to have you on with us this afternoon. And I want you to tell the audience all about your real estate insight and your story. And so I thought at the start at the beginning, and as a 10-year-old, did you have visions of what you wanted to create as an adult? Or they were just starting to evolve at 10?
Well, Toni, look, thank you very much for that great introduction. And I'll start off by saying that obviously James and Kelly are in Australia. So originally, yes, they are from China, but they're living in Australia at the moment. And the 10-year-old question you asked was, well, imagine if you're a 10-year-old sitting cross-legged and watching what your parents are doing. So that was the experience that I had, just sitting there reading a book back in those days, and this is really when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was a little younger.
No.
Yes. I was reading a book and my father was lifting carpet off a old house that my parents bought.
Yes.
And I said to him, well, Dad, why did you buy a house with such old carpet? And my father looked at me and said,
Uh-huh.
Amir, the house will always be a walking distance to Bondi Beach. And in Sydney, Bondi Beach is one of the great attractions. But the carpet will be gone today. But the most important thing in real estate is location, location, location. And I guess that kind of stayed with me. And that dusty old carpet was gone by the end of that day. But it's really that little learning that sparked in me, I guess, a love of investing in real estate, but also knowing where to buy and what to buy.
Mm. I can imagine, Amir, that a property in Bondi back then would have been wonderful to purchase based on today's prices. I don't suppose he still has the house.
No, it's I think my parents kept it for more than a decade. So perhaps it was even 2 decades that they kept the house. But it is something where they bunny hopped from one to another. And a lot of people think, well, how can I start without having a huge deposit to get into the property market? And the reality is that your first purchase isn't going to be the thing that you end up with, but it will be something that potentially when it grows, your percentage ownership of it becomes larger simply by the increase of the value. And the bank's ownership of it becomes smaller and smaller as the intrinsic value increases.
Fantastic. So obviously you learnt from your parents a few bits and pieces. You did some education in financial planning. And you did the real estate, and then you went into becoming a buyer's agent. So just for our audience this afternoon, can you explain what a buyer's agent is and why it was that you swapped onto that path then versus a conventional real estate path?
Oh, that's quite a large question, Toni. So I guess from a definition point of view, a buyer's agent is a real estate agent that works on the behalf of the buyer. So that means that there's no conflict of interest. When I'm representing you as you're the buyer and I'm the buyer's agent, I negotiate prices down. So that means I would go into a real estate agency that is selling the property, but I represent you and I come in as a buyer, and really the real estate agents that are selling love me because they're looking for buyers. So I walk in with a check in hand perhaps and say, look, I'm ready to buy. These are my conditions. I'm looking for something large, small, on this street, not on that street, and give them the list of requirements that I have. But the reason a selling agent loves a buyer's agent is that I'm not the emotional party. I'm the person that comes in saying, look, I'm ready. I'm realistic. I've done my research. So there isn't that toing and froing where you might think, well, how many times do I have to go through the explanation of why something's worth something? I'm already coming in at the same level as the selling agent. I've got the open book of what's sold locally, what the comparisons are, so that we don't need to start the conversation of, let's hype this up, let's get this. I'm already starting at step 3 or 4. So we're talking about saving time and saving money. But realistically, the selling agent wants to sell, the buying agent wants to buy. So we've got 2 people talking business to business. And it's a lot more of a comfortable conversation, whether I'm speaking directly to an agent that has 1,000 things to sell or one thing to sell. The conversation's the same. I'm the buyer, you're the seller. Makes it easy.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about the number of times that we've bought and sold real estate. It never occurred to me to engage a buyer's agent. But since I've met you and been doing the real estate, I'm like, why on earth didn't I know about wonderful people like Amir sooner? That takes the work involved in finding the right property in the right space for the right price. And it takes that emotional pull out of it. You know, when you go into that beautiful house that's just above your price range and you really, really, really want it, but you know that it's just outside or it's not quite right. If you had someone else doing all of that for you, you would have a better outcome. Is that kind of why you went into this area, Amir?
Well, one of my passions, Tony, is the hunting. What you described is like finding
Yeah.
the property that you love. And even when I go on holidays, I mean, I remember my wife and I went down to Tasmania, which is about, I live in Sydney. So Sydney to Tasmania is a few
Yes.
thousand kilometres. We flew down there for a wedding. And during our little 2 or 3 night stay there, during the nighttime, I sat down and I had a look on the computer of the local sales in the area. And of course, I dragged my wife across to the local real estate agency the next day, and we just had to look through the shop window. But for me, instead of shopping
Yeah.
for shoes and hats, the thing that excites me is shopping for real estate. I guess it isn't a surprise that within 3 weeks, when we were back in Sydney, we ended up actually making an offer on that property that we inspected, and we ended up buying it and keeping it for 7 years. So
Oh,
sometimes holidays just
wow.
end up, you might buy that shirt with a logo. Sometimes you end up buying an
Mhm.
investment property. So yeah, that's my
Yeah,
passion.
yeah. I have to agree, Amir. I actually still like to buy the Saturday paper and look through the real estate columns and see what's selling and what's not. And I like to know the prices of the properties around where I currently live, and I like to see what they're doing and who's selling for what. And I absolutely agree with you about that fascination about real estate. Um, what is the thing for you that you love most about investing? Is it the prospect of holding on to that investment and seeing what will happen with it? Or what is it? What's the thing that really excites you about investing in property?
Well, look, I guess there's a lot of facets to investments. One thing that we do in
Mm,
3DB Tree is that we look at the three different realms that are involved. Some people really love to
yes.
get hands-on and love to do every little thing, like painting the house, changing the door handles, making
Yeah.
something look 10 times better by styling, so putting new furniture in, and then putting
Yes.
something on the market for sale. Other people look at
Hmm.
buying and holding for 15 years, 20 years, or potentially forever.
Yes.
And it might be the
Yes.
same thing of a quick paint job, change the carpets, as we were talking about before. But
Yeah.
that little styling and then advertising it for a tenant and being the landlord sometimes attracts other people. For me, it's a wide
Hmm.
variety. The
Yes.
I guess that's where the 9 books came from in the Where's the Bees
Yes.
Blueprint series, where I
Yes.
really covered so many different facets of property, real estate, selling and buying, that I started just recording myself, just a little audio speaking to my mobile phone. And
Yeah.
that's where the books came from, where they're more of a blueprint on a step by step, almost like a
Yes.
textbook for university. It's that higher level, not
Yeah.
that introductory level, but
Yes.
the real how to step by step DIY process. And the passion really developed
Yeah.
from the three different Ds: the do it yourself,
Yes.
done with you, and done for you. Um,
I love them.
what my interest is, I liked each step of it, but now I'm really
Hmm.
passionate about working with people within the 3DB Tree website. And people send me through
Yes.
requests via the forms. They give me a rough idea of where they're at. And then are they looking
Uh-huh.
for a do it yourself? Are they looking for a done for you? Are they looking for them to half and half do something with me and join forces so they can learn and on a week by week basis ask questions?
Oh, that's really exciting because oftentimes you find that people have to learn by themselves or learn from their own mistakes, but they can learn whilst you help them with all your knowledge and wisdom from all your years of property and real estate and investing. So the 3Ds is part and parcel of what you do with your company now. Um, what have you learned from those Bs?
So from the B, where the B's blueprint formula is,
Yes.
I started off, so of the 9 books, we covered the how to appeal to the vendor who isn't ready, how to renovate for
Yes.
sale, how to master short-term accommodation without becoming a part-time cleaner. It's one of my favorites. How to write
Yes.
an option contract, meaning how to find the correct professional to help you set up a contract for buying and selling. How to grow on LinkedIn, specifically for real estate agents. How to market using Clubhouse on both
Ah,
the Apple iOS and the Android platforms. How to
yes.
monetize on Facebook, how to attract on Instagram, how to secretly grow your income in property without becoming a landlord. And
Oh,
there's a
that's
lot of people that,
fascinating.
oh, look, there's just so many different little nuggets, little bits of truth that you can uncover with. Some of it can be your own experience, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to
Mm-hmm.
risk all your money on experience because if things go
Yeah.
wrong, you're risking a massive amount of money. So
Yes.
sometimes it's
Yes,
better
you
to
are.
use somebody else's experience instead of trying to experience everything yourself. And that's where the balance is in the
Absolutely.
3Ds. The do it yourself is great on some stages, the done for you is
Mm-hmm.
great on some stages. But there are some times where you want to stick your toe in and experiment and learn about something
Yes.
in a safe, reliable, and secure way. So rather than doing everything yourself, or rather than paying somebody a complete fee for them to do it for you,
Mm,
where's that middle
yeah.
ground? The good thing about the
Yeah.
3 different Bs is that using the Where's the Bees blueprint formula, there's a way for you to step by step through it. But having the 9 books that teach you along the way,
Yes.
whether you go 3D as a DIY, 3D as a done with
Mm-hmm.
you, or 3D done for you, those 9 books are
Mm-hmm.
part of each one of the 3 programs. But the difference is when you're doing it yourself,
Wow.
you're reading the books and then you're part of the um, Facebook group,
Group.
which is a selective group
Mm.
that once you're in, it's a private group, it's got exclusive readership, and you're talking between other people that are interested in the same type of level. The Done With You is also part of a group, but you do get a chance to every week explain what area you're interested in. Meaning that if you've got an interest
Oh,
in Sydney and you'd like to invest
yeah.
perhaps in something within the region that's nearby, let's pick a suburb of, say, Palm Beach in Sydney. So that
Yes.
northern beach area is your
Mm-hmm.
vote.
Mm,
If
very
you've got a
nice.
part of that group, everybody gets a
Mm-hmm.
vote each week. And then that vote, whichever region or suburb gets more than one vote or several votes,
Yeah.
that winner for the week gets discussed in depth. So,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that in that 8 week program, you're actually getting specific numbers.
Yes.
We do the research with you out
On
of whatever you
specific
voted
suburb.
for. That's right. And the done for you, of course, you're
Mm-hmm.
hiring us as a group to find something as a buyer's
Yes.
agent who's got a license to find something for you, whether that buyer's agent is buying in Jerusalem or Sydney or the US or India. The correct licensed real estate agent they'll be talking to you is the one that's licensed in that region. So in
Yes.
Israel, for example, there's
Yes.
perhaps a 15-minute drive from one area to another, but the lifestyle is completely different. So if you think about Jerusalem and Tel
Ah,
Aviv, Jerusalem might have a
yes.
specific attraction to people buying in Australia. So perhaps somebody in
Mm-hmm.
Israel is selling a house in Jerusalem that has a beautiful outlook, a
Yes.
beautiful view. For somebody in Israel, that view is great. And they also think about how to drive to work from there. But from an overseas investor
Um,
that's in Australia, but has a strong Jewish
yes.
heritage, wants to buy something in Israel
Yes.
because it attracts them from that spiritual way, then they're attracted to the
Mm-hmm.
Jerusalem view so that they own a
Yes.
piece of their own history and feel that, okay, they're now buying something in the Holy Land. Same thing in Tel Aviv.
Wow.
There's areas of Tel Aviv that are, Herzliya, for example, has a great
Mm-hmm.
industrial. It's like the Silicon Valley of Israel. The high-tech companies that are working there have their offices spread there. And so if you're working in a high-tech, perhaps a venture capitalist or a technology area that's based in Herzliya, then you want to buy specifically to be able to work and live close to where you work. So, I mean, nobody really wants to be stuck in a traffic jam. 90% of the time working from home, but you want to be close enough to your office. So if you do need to meet a client or you do need to do a face-to-face, eventually, God willing, we'll be able to all do that soon. You don't need to drive. Also, you don't need to invite somebody to your bedroom to do a business presentation for them. I mean, at the end of the day, we all love working from home. But when it comes time to inviting a client that's never met you before, you don't want to spend 3 hours cleaning the house either.
Yeah, yeah. So, Amir, that's where your company has wonderful connections spread across the world. That's my understanding. So, if you have an Australian buyer and they're, like you said, wanting to buy in Israel, you can actually drill down to where they want to be, how close they want to be to whatever amenities or work or leisure that they want to be, and you can act on their behalf and purchase in Israel. Is that how it works?
That's a great question. So in Israel, for example, I work with Meir Glusberg.
Yes.
Meir's really well known in Israel, and he's been in real estate for a very long time. He's based in Israel. So now, the difference in Australia, if I want to go to Tasmania that we spoke about before, that's a flight. That's a few thousand kilometers. In Israel, you can get from one side to the other extreme within hours. So Meir Glusberg, as much as he's just in one city, travels through all of Israel. So when I have a referral for somebody in Israel or an Australian buy in Israel, I speak to Meir Glusberg, and Meir speaks to the customer directly. My license is for Australia, so I handle Sydney, I handle New South Wales, which is the state that Sydney is in. But if somebody's asking me about a state outside of where I'm in, my connections within Australia go to directly somebody, obviously, who has a license for the other state we're talking to. Internationally, it's the same. So our connections in Florida, our connections in Washington, our connections in New York, they have a license specifically within the state that my customer is asking about, which means that there's different rules, there's different contracts on a state-by-state and a country-by-country basis. You'd never dream of doing everything yourself because at the end of the day, you're signing a contract for a lot of money. And even if it's the cheapest building on the street, that's still not going to be a pair of shoes.
No.
So really, it has to be done legally, officially, and even though we've got a global reach, we speak specifically to local experts. So local experts in Tel Aviv, local experts in Beersheba, local experts in Kfar Saba, local experts in Jerusalem. So every city has their own specialist.
So, Amir, if Australians are looking to purchase in somewhere like Israel, it's absolutely doable through your group and your connections, and you can guide them through that whole process so that it becomes a little less stressful. The thought of buying real estate internationally, particularly at the moment when Australians can't fly, knowing that they can partner with someone like you to help them through that process must be terribly satisfying from your perspective.
It is. It's very satisfying. I think a lot of it for me became the fact that I was in the trenches for so long, the fact that I actually did what I preach, rather than just being academically somebody who learned how to, and then I'm trying to teach somebody else how to. I guess I've been investing now for close to 29 years. So it's I've come across a lot of very fortunate people. But I know in Israel, so Meir Glusberg spoke to me about the dealings he's had with Tom Barron and Ofik Football. Now, these two guys in Israel have a lot of experience specifically in Israel, but both Meir and Tom they're English speakers as well as Hebrew speakers, so they're fluent in two languages. And Mayer's lived in Canada for a while. Tom's lived in Australia for a while. So sometimes you just get lucky with who you come across. And my global outreach, so the way that I've managed to somehow land in this type of role where the connections are so widespread, has come through Brent Gove. Have you heard of Brent Gove, Toni? So
I've heard of the name.
Right. So Brent is a real estate agent in the US. And in America, he worked with one of the largest international groups there. So when Brent expanded into Australia, his teaching, his webinars, everything is available for download. Yeah. So I don't need to wake up in the middle of the night to listen to the next Brent Gove webinar on how to do this. But Brent has now grown an international real estate company that's spanned across the US, 16 countries. So I'm not going to list all of them, but Italy, US, Israel, South America, Hong Kong, France, so Spain, Portugal, and the list goes on, 16 countries. So that really gave me a lot of confidence in working internationally.
Yes. I was just going to say, one of my dreams is to buy that snow chalet in Canada. And when I think about that, I'm thinking, but how would I know if it's in a good spot? How would I know if it's a good purchase for the size that it is? And then when you think about the styles of living between Australia and other countries, obviously the way we live in Australia is quite different from the way that they live in Israel. And having that experience and that team behind you, you can actually give purchasers advice on, well, no, that's probably a bit small for your needs, or perhaps a house or an apartment. Perhaps this apartment is actually the equivalent of the house that you'd like. So that sort of advice, I'm assuming, would be invaluable in that process, particularly if you can't fly to Jerusalem, say, and have a look at the property.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there, Toni. A lot of the things that I learned from a how-to analysis point of view came from Mike Gerbic and Craig Pellig. Now, what Australia has $1 million agents. What that means is, as a real estate agent who's selling, they're hitting that $1 million amount of commissions. We're not talking about $1 million house, but they're earning commissions of $1 million. Mike Gerbic from the US is a $1 billion agent. That means with a B. So that's, in Australia, the market's quite small. I mean, we're less than 30 million people. In the US, you're looking at over 300 million people. So when you're looking at a larger point of view of how do I compare a chalet in Switzerland to a chalet in Canada?
Exactly.
That's more of a Mike Gerbic and a Craig Pellig point of view, because these are the guys that in the US have done the big numbers. They've gone across different states. And just like Australia, on the East Coast and West Coast, things are so completely different. Imagine in the US, the 50 states, you can't compare Hawaii to Washington. Those states are completely different. The rules are different. The paperwork's different. The housing's different. The considerations of wind, snow, all the conditions are different.
All of those things.
So, so I worked on a process and a system where I didn't need to reinvent the wheel. So I spent quite a lot of time with Craig Pellig, and almost on a weekly basis, I'm learning from the people that have, in real estate, done the selling and the buying, whether it's, the US, whether it's Australia, whether it's Europe. The conditions are different, but you know what? There's three things that are absolutely the same everywhere. One of them is everybody needs a roof over their heads.
Yeah.
Whether you're going to be renting or you're going to be buying, whether you're investing in condos, apartments, units, houses, house of multiple occupancies, there's different words for the same thing, but the universal thing is that everybody needs shelter. So that's a universal thing. The second thing that I've learned really is that if you look at the way that the world is made up, there is
Mm-hmm.
Not a single person that's become wealthy without owning at least one real estate property. Think about this, not
Yes.
99.9, but 100% of people in this world have only become wealthy if they own one or
Through
more property.
property.
So if you're thinking that
Mm.
your grandchildren will always be renters and will never own the property that they live in, you are
Yeah.
moving a property cycle forward. You're putting your
Yes.
children in a disadvantage. So eventually you
Yeah.
really need to, if it's important for you to grow wealth, if it's important for you to
Mm.
provide shelter, if you're no longer
Yes.
thinking that rent is appropriate for 100 years for your children and grandchildren, you need to break the cycle somewhere. Now, it sounds like I'm preaching,
Mm.
but think of it this way.
No.
100% of people that have become wealthy, and I don't just mean multi-billionaires, but from an absolute minimum level of wealth, every
Yes.
single one, 100%, has owned a property, 100%. The third thing that's a commonality is that regardless of where you are in the world, it's
Mm-hmm.
not enough for you to work until you're 100 years old. Eventually, you're
Yeah.
going to need to retire. So
Yes.
that's just one thing that's across the board. Doesn't matter where you're living. Eventually, you just can't keep working at the same pace as you did when you were 20 or as you did when you were 60. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
when that stage happens for you, and it's going to be different at every stage for everybody. But the one
Yeah.
commonality is that eventually you don't want to just keep working. So your rent money is always going to be showing up for you week on, week off, week on, week off. As soon as you own,
Yeah.
you start becoming that level where your costs start dropping down, because whatever you borrowed to purchase originally, in 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, you're not going to owe as much as when you first bought that. So the clock
That's
keeps
right.
running for everybody universally. So those three
Yes.
things of not wanting to rent forever, thinking
Yes.
about just thinking of your children and your grandchildren, or even yourself as you
Mm-hmm.
grow older, and
Yes.
that 100% of people that have bought property, or sorry, 100% of people that
Yes.
have
Who have
established wealth own one or more properties. It makes it all universal. So it's not a decision of
mm,
am I going to or not going to, but it's a question of when will you. And then you
yeah.
find a system that, again, with the 3DB tree system, are you going to do it as a DIY? Do you want to do it as a done with you deal, or do you want a done for you deal?
Done for
It
you.
kind of makes the conversation a bit easier, doesn't it?
I know. So, Amir, behind all of that is that the fundamental belief that you believe that everyone has a pathway to real estate ownership, and you have different pathways for different people to get themselves into real estate because of all the investing in real estate that you've done. So even when you hear on the news, for instance, that young people will never be able to afford their own home, I don't agree with that. And obviously, you don't agree with that either, because there are ways and means in which you can start out on the real estate pathway and get in there and start owning your piece of real estate. There's multiple different ways to do that, isn't there?
So, look, I want to put this in a very simple way.
Yes.
Not everybody's born the same way. So, some people are disadvantaged, some people are born with an advantage. If
Yes.
you're born in a
Yes.
family where you're struggling just to put food on your table, then your first thought isn't going to be,
Uh-huh.
well, let's put aside
Food. Yes.
$10,000 or $100,000 so that you can buy property. I'm not saying that at
Mm.
all, because everybody
No.
starts in a different position. But the way that I started with $5,000 and moved to a large property
Yes.
portfolio was not necessarily in having a large deposit or being spoon fed or somebody giving me a, a
Yeah.
presidential sum of money to start things off. There's always a service from your
Away.
time and your money that you can offer. Now, what happens if
Mm.
somebody doesn't have the skill set or the mindset or the intelligence to offer, to be the builder for somebody, or physically
Yes.
doesn't have the strength to be the renovator for somebody? Because let's talk about this realistically. What we're talking about is swapping time for money. So if you say to somebody, look, you help me, we'll go into partnership, I'll do the painting, you buy the house, you provide the money. Not everybody can be a good painter. Not everybody can be a good builder. So it's not a one size fits all, but everybody's got the skill set to either ask for help from somebody who's done it before through a do-it-yourself system, or a do-it-with-you, or a do-it-for-you.
Done for you.
Where you are from the start doesn't determine where you end up. If you're fortunate enough to be born into any family that cares for you, or if over the lifetime that you've had so far, you're fortunate enough to make friends, you'll find that somebody from your friends or your family or yourself has enough skill to be able to read the book. And it's available for audiobook or a book to read. So if you're, I was speaking to a Jamaican that interviewed me on the NDIS system, the system that Australia has for helping people who are less fortunate from a disability point of view. And the question was, well, in Australia, you've got a great system for somebody who's visually impaired or somebody who has a hearing problem. So we covered through that, I think it was around a 45-minute interview, what we can do to retrofit a house. How do you set up a house so that if your vendor or your tenant who's going to be living there has a sight issue.
Is in a wheelchair or...
Exactly, in a wheelchair, or has sight issues or has hearing issues, how do we make it easier for somebody to still have the roof over their heads? And that's the same thing with the DIY books. If you're going to learn and you have the willingness to learn, then you can listen to the books. You can read the books. There's always subtitles. There's always, I'm not going to go step by step through everything, but if you have the wish and you have the goal and you follow somebody who's done it before, then no matter where you're starting from, you can follow the step-by-step to get there at the end. If your starting position of weakness is that you don't have a massive deposit, or if your starting position of weakness is that you don't have massive amounts of time, or if your starting position of weakness is you just don't have the skill set or the experience, we have the answer to that. But just go into the 3DB tree, and that website, it has a good form for you to fill in.
Great website.
It doesn't have a lot of information. You're not flooded with too much data.
No.
I want to know how we can help you. So have a look at the 3dbtree.com.au website.
.com.au.
That's right, 3dbtree.com.au. Type in your questions there.
They can ask you anything, can't they, Amir, in relation to real estate, of course. But
in relation to real estate.
You're open to all sorts of questions about real estate. What a wonderful offer for the listeners today. And anyone who's watching this, jump onto Amir's website, 3dbtree.com.au. That'll be in the chat box for those listening online, and we'll repeat it again before the end of the show. But Amir loves your questions, and will readily have an answer for you about whatever it is that you need to know. But also on that website, there's access to that whole series of books, and they're great. I was on there earlier today, and they're fantastic. So I encourage you, if you want just to know a place to start, then jump on and have a look at the books and see which one fits with where you're at, and then ask Amir the questions. Amir, I want to talk about your real estate portfolio. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, obviously you're an Australian and obviously you like investing in Australia, but what other country have you found that was a really enjoyable place to have a property?
So I'll cover this with a disclaimer first. So all of this is general information only and may or may not suit your details. So seek financial advice and real estate advice from an expert in your local state and country. But to answer your question, Toni, I found that we were talking before about the commonality in everywhere in the world.
Yes.
The way that I look at commonality is, where are people actually working? Because to afford to pay rent on an investment property means that there must be a job that's available in the area. So I might love the Gobi Desert in Australia. It might be a beautiful place to see the entire sky at night without a cloud, put the telescope up and the camera and see this incredible sky. The Milky Way and every star that you can see with the naked eye or telescope. But I wouldn't invest there. Why? Because there's no jobs there. So that's where I came up with the Where's the Bees blueprint. There has to be worker bees. If you have bees that are buzzing around, doing jobs, manufacturing, even if it has great internet connection and there's a call center because the internet is so strong, that means that you've got worker bees that are in the area. And the Where's the Bees blueprint says, okay, this is how you research. That's what the bees stands for. So when I go into the Where's the Bees blueprint, through the do-it-yourself and do it with you and do it for you system, the system looks at BEES. So the E in bees, right? So the E in bees is employment. So the employment part of the E is, when I research an area, I look at how many jobs are temporary. It's no good just having an infrastructure that they're building a bridge and the government's paying for it, and in 2 years' time, the bridge will be finished.
That's right.
Long term. So on the employment side of the BEES, the E is long-term jobs that have sustainability and enough flexibility so it's not just one style of job. I mean, one of the scariest things was investing in an area with mines. So if you think of coal mines, if you open a mine and you work there, that might work for 5 years or 10 years until it's politically bad to be doing dirty energy and everybody's moving towards clean energy. So what happens if the government or the locals vote against having a coal mine in your area? I'd never invest in an area that only has one style of infrastructure, one style of employment. So the E in the
Great advice
is, what type of jobs are there, and are they wide enough to be able to sustain an ongoing income in that area? So some of the beautiful places that I've found in remote locations have jobs. So let me take Poland as an example. Poland being in the middle of Europe for many years, even before it joined the EU, but for many years, Poland has been pre-manufacturing, prefabricating steel, as well as building prefabricated buildings for London and for some of the other countries and cities around Europe. So having an industrious area, and Poland is quite a large country, so not every city in Poland is as good to invest in as other cities in Poland. And this is what I mean with, this is general advice only, and you need to do your research. Take Poland, for example. So Poland has been manufacturing steel and changing the raw material into hanging and shelving products. They've internationally exported the finished product from Poland. The finished housing has been internationally transferred via trucks, via trains, but all over Europe and sometimes overseas to other continents as well. So if you work out where a good industry is, whether it's Poland or somewhere else in the world, you'll find that part of the Bees formula can be used for your benefit.
What a great formula, Amir.
I love your questions, Toni.
You've just reinvigorated my love of all things real estate, and my poor brain's going, ask me this, ask me that, ask me this. It's just really going into overdrive. But what I've really learned is that you have these amazing systems to help lots and lots of people across the world to get into real estate in a number of ways, and you have the connections across the planet to assist you in this endeavor. I'm thinking about, different places over the world that I've been and visited, and thought, oh gosh, wouldn't it be nice to have a little chalet here, or a little home here, or wouldn't it be nice to summer here or winter there? And you've actually spurred my imagination to think that is entirely doable with a company like yours. It's entirely doable from Australia to have international real estate and have the experts help you do that. I mean, just quickly, have you worked with clients that have bought a do-it-yourself project in another country whilst living in Australia?
So I'll cover this. I'll cover this in a few different languages, if I may, Toni.
Absolutely.
So, from an investment in Israel point of view, I work with Meir, who's based in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the quick answer is that we just started a week ago a new part of the company, which is specializing in exactly what you're saying, international investors. I'll cover this in 3 languages because in Israel, a lot of people do speak English. A lot of people speak Hebrew, and a lot of people, my tongue is twisting already, and I haven't even started on my second language. A lot of Israelis speak Russian, English, and Hebrew.
Yes.
So I had a great session with Meir, and we covered some of the most common words that I'm going to get asked if I do a Zoom like with you. And I'd love to test this out on the international platform, if I may.
Absolutely.
So the first word that Meir taught me is the word for realtors. In other words, what Australians call real estate agents and Americans call real estate brokers or realtors.
Mm-hmm.
In Hebrew, it's, and excuse my pronunciation, mitvachim bemekarkian.
Sounds
And
good.
in Russian, it's realtori, which sounds like real to me.
Yeah, it does, yes.
I asked Meir for the translation of B tree because the 3 Ds that we covered about, the DIY, DWY, and DFY is the 3 Ds. So the website 3DB tree translates to 3D Etz Dvora. Etz Dvora, which is Plechinnoye Derevo. No, that's not right. Pchelinoya. Yeah, Pchelinoya derevo, which is a bee tree. DIY, do it yourself, is Aseh zot be'atzmecha. Aseh zot be'atzmecha, which is do it yourself in Hebrew, and Stile sam, which is do it yourself in Russian. DWY was Na'aseh itcha. Na'aseh itcha. Done with you in Hebrew. And Stielano Stavoy. I hope I'm not butchering this too much, but it's so much fun to say.
It sounds pretty good. They are fun, aren't they?
DFY, done for you, is Na'aseh beshvilcha. Na'aseh bishvilcha, which in Russian is Stielano dla tibia. Tibia, sorry. Stielano dla tibia. Now, from a talking point, when you're talking to somebody and I'm explaining what I would do for them, the question always comes back to, well, what's in it for me? Why should I trust you? Who are you? Why should I listen to you? Is this a good time? Why now? So I've covered some of those questions. But of course, in Hebrew and in Russian, I'm going to cover them so that, first of all, Toni, you can put this in your hashtags later on. So when we're doing this as a Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. This will be a great way for us to put it in multiple languages. So I love that bit of it.
Yes.
But here is what will you get out of it? In other words, what's in it for you? In Hebrew is Ma yitzeh lachem mizeh. Ma yitzeh lachem mizeh. In Russian, that's Что вы от этого получите? Что вы от этого получите? Получите. Wow, that's hard.
Yeah.
And when somebody's thinking
I
as
think
a
you're
real
doing a
estate,
very good job.
I tell you what, these tongue twisters are great. But from a real estate point of view, when I'm training a real estate agent and they're coming across to work with us, because we use local agents. So even though I'm a global company, I'm looking for a global real estate agent who's got a global reach but a local knowledge. If I was reaching somebody in Israel who's already a real estate agent in Israel or a Russian-speaking real estate agent, so that I can cover both English speakers, Russian speakers, and Hebrew speakers, they would ask me, well, why should I work for your company instead of staying at the company I'm at? So the question is, why should I move now? Which is Lama la'avor achshav. In Russian, it's Zachem perejat сейчас. Zachem perejat сейчас. Why to come over now? And of course, everybody wants to know how much money they're going to make out of it. So what's the split? What's the commission split? How much does each person get? Which is Hachaluka. And in Russian, что такое деление? Что такое деление? And what are the fees? So when somebody's working for themselves, especially if they're running their own business and they're responsible for the finances, they want to know what the fees are to run the business. So in Hebrew, what are the costs or what are the fees is mahem alayot. Sorry, aluyot. Mahem ha'aluyot. Or in Russian, каковы затратье. Каковы.
Oh, I like that one. I like that one.
You like that one? Because really, the questions everywhere around the world are going to be very similar.
Yes.
What does it cost me?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's in it for me? Why now? Why should I come over to your company?
Yeah.
And I mean, Mayor Blusberg has been really great at answering those questions in Israel, because regardless in Israel, whether you're investing in Tel Aviv, in Hod HaSharon, in Herzliya, in Kfar Petach Tikva, in that, every area has its own speciality, but everywhere in Israel is joinable by drive. You can really drive from one part of Israel to the other.
I never thought of it like that, Amir. That's amazing to know. Just so you know, we're down to the last minute, and I don't want to cut you off because I'm having so much fun. Our one takeaway for the audience this afternoon, Amir and I are hoping to do some more shows together, so don't think you've heard the last of us. But Amir, what is the one thing you want to leave with the audience this afternoon, besides the fact that real estate across the world is doable nowadays? Go for it.
So 3DB tree. Why did I come up with a tree? I guess the thing is that, yes, we are all interconnected and we all have roots somewhere from an ancestry point of view. But my name, Amir, in Hebrew, actually means the top of a tree. So there's a lot of different, Amir in different languages means great things everywhere. So in Arabic, it's got one meaning. In Indian, it's got a different meaning. In Hebrew, it's got a different meaning, but they're all good meanings. So my parents actually came up with two different lists and compared them, and Amir was on both lists. So the tree side, the 3DB tree, of course, the B is from the Where's the Bees blueprint. The 3D is the DIY, do it yourself.
Yeah, the three systems.
Done with you, done for you. But the 3DB tree was born out of a lot of experience, but also the fact that we all have a lot of commonality. We've all got some sort of common ancestry. And we've learned so much in the last 12 to 18 months, where some of us have been locked at home, Some of us have
Haven't
just
we?
started using computers for the first time and learned about Zoom and Skype and how we can all
Yes.
see each other with
Yes.
videos. Where before it was largely face-to-face or phone calls. Now the isolation has become so much more
Yeah.
global that we've reversed it. And instead of isolation, we're now a lot more connected than we ever were before.
Connected. Yeah.
So use it. Use the opportunity that's now come out of it, because your kids, your children,
And
and your
connect across
grandchildren
the
are going
world.
to ask you, what did you do when everything changed? This is one of these global things that's really, once every 100 years, things change dramatically. Use this
Yeah.
opportunity to grow your family, grow your
Absolutely.
connections, grow your friends, and grow your business. For the first time in hundreds of years, we've got a brand new revolution that isn't driven just from one direction, but we are all doing things in our own little realm where we can all help each other, whether it's investing in property,
Absolutely.
family fortunes, or just getting to know people who you've never had contact with before. The hashtags have been growing because there's so much commonality, but there's a couple of things that just
Absolutely.
everybody needs. One of them is shelter, health, wealth, shelter. It all comes from one joint
Fundamentals.
thing. We're all humans.
Amir Meshel, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been a wonderful session and I can't wait to do more with you soon. I've got loads more questions to ask you. Please, audience, thank you, Amir, for being on Radio Toni Everyday Business this afternoon. I certainly appreciate his time and effort this afternoon. We look forward to bringing you some more series, hopefully in the future. Thank you, Amir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom and your knowledge and sharing with the Radio Toni audience. Goodbye, everyone. That's your lot for this week. Hopefully we'll be back soon. Thanks and bye for now.